Imagine a single piece of paper signed on a Tuesday afternoon in Washington, D.C. that just fundamentally alters your reality. I mean, just a few strokes of a pen that decide whether, the coal plant in your county stays open for another decade or whether your monthly electric bill doubles to power some sprawling artificial intelligence server farm somewhere.
Or even whether the United States military quietly deploys across a sovereign border. I mean, most of us never read these papers.
Right. We just catch a 30-second summary on the evening news, or we see a polished headline floating across our social media feeds, and we just assume the summary matches the reality.
Yeah, we assume that the stated intent of a government document is identical to its actual real-world effect.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that is almost never the case. The gap between what a policy says it will do and the actual mechanical reality of how it operates, that's where the true story of our lives is actually written.
And today, we don't have to assume anything because we have the actual text. Sitting right here, literally piled high on the desk between us, is this massive stack of official White House documents. We're looking at executive orders, presidential proclamations, official fact sheets, and nomination lists. And all of this was generated during a single, incredibly busy week in March of 2026.
It's a staggering volume of bureaucratic output, honestly.
It really is. And our mission today is to treat this stack of paper like a forensic audit. We're going to cut straight through the polished political messaging, ignore all the partisan noise, and just analyze the raw machinery of government. We want to know how these specific actions actually impact you, the regular American.
Right, because we are looking at what the text claims it will achieve versus how the law, the economy, and the global geopolitical landscape actually function in the real world. And just to establish our methodology up front, because navigating this kind of material really requires total precision. We are strictly analyzing the text of the documents provided in this stack. We are not evaluating the administration itself, nor are we taking political sides.
No, not at all.
We are operating purely as mechanics here, popping the hood on these policies to see if the engine actually connects to the wheels. So when a document claims to lower your bills, protect your family, or secure the nation, we are going to look at the legal and constitutional architecture to see if that promise is structurally sound. Or, if it's simply political theater.
Let's pop the hood then. And the first document on the stack deals with something that touches literally every single person listening to this right now. The electrical grid.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one.
Yeah. I'm looking at a fact sheet and an accompanying proclamation, both dated March 4th, 2026. And the focal point is something called the Ratepayer Protection Pledge.
Yeah.
And honestly, the pitch here sounds incredibly reassuring. The administration points out that tech giants, we're talking companies like Amazon, Google, Meta, and OpenAI, are building massive, just unprecedented artificial intelligence data centers across the country.
And to give that some scale, we are not talking about like a warehouse full of computers here. We are talking about facilities that require gigawatts of power.
Right. Gigawatts. That's huge.
It is. A single one of these next-generation AI server farms can consume as much electricity as a mid-sized American city. The energy demands of the artificial intelligence sector are creating a load growth on the U.S. electrical grid that we honestly haven't seen since the massive industrialization booms of the mid-20th century.
Which is wild to think about. So the administration's stated intent in this document is to protect the average citizen from footing the bill for that massive power draw. The text claims they've brought all these major tech companies to the table to sign this Ratepayer Protection Pledge.
Right.
And the companies have supposedly promised to build, bring, or buy new power generation to offset their usage and to pay for any necessary infrastructure upgrades. So the headline is essentially, big tech is paying for their own AI power, so your home utility bill will not go up.
That is the headline.
Yeah.
But when we transition from the headline to the actual legal mechanics of the text, a glaring structural flaw appears immediately.
Okay, what is it?
Look at the specific phrasing used to describe how this pledge will be executed. The document states that these tech companies will, and I'm quoting directly from the text here, voluntarily negotiate new, separate rate structures with their utilities and relevant state governments.
Voluntarily negotiate.
Yeah.
Okay. In the world of regulatory law, what does voluntary actually mean?
It means it is entirely legally toothless.
Wow. Toothless.
It's literally zero enforcement mechanism. To understand why this matters to the person listening, we have to look at how electricity is actually priced and regulated in the United States. Your power bill is not set by the president, and it's not set by the CEO of a tech company.
Right.
It is set by a state public utility commission, or a PUC.
Right. These are those state-level boards that hold hearings whenever the local power company wants to raise the rates on households. I've seen those in the local news.
Exactly. So let's walk through the mechanics of how this plays out in the real world. Imagine a local utility company in, say, Ohio needs to build a billion-dollar high-voltage transmission line and a new substation specifically to deliver power to a brand-new, massive AI data center.
Okay.
The utility company spends the money. Then, by law, they go to the Ohio Public Utility Commission to file a rate case, asking to raise electricity prices to recoup that $1 billion, plus a guaranteed margin of profit.
And this is where the administration's document implies the tech company will just step in and hand over a check, right?
Yeah.
Because they signed the pledge.
Right. But what happens when the tech company's lawyers decide that the voluntary negotiation isn't going well, and they choose not to pay for the entirety of that infrastructure?
I mean, I think someone gets mad.
Well, the consumer advocate at the PUC hearing will stand up and say, wait, the tech company signed a White House pledge saying they would pay for this, protect the homeowners. And the utility company's lawyers will just calmly point out that a press release from Washington, D.C. is not binding statutory law.
Let me push back on this for a second, though. Isn't getting these massive monopolies to sign any public pledge better than absolutely nothing? I mean, doesn't it at least give the public and the administration massive PR leverage to shame them if they try to back out?
You think so, yeah.
Like, if Amazon or Google publicly promises to pay, aren't they going to be held to the fire in the court of public opinion?
Well, the court of public opinion does not pay for copper wiring and transformers. And historically, the concept of corporate shaming rarely overrides fiduciary duty to shareholders.
That's a good point.
If a tech company can legally avoid a billion-dollar infrastructure charge, their executives are financially incentivized to do so. In regulatory law, if it is not codified, it basically does not exist. The State Utility Commission is legally bound to ensure the utility company remains solvent and gets its guaranteed rate of return.
So if the tech company legally maneuvers out of paying, because the pledge is voluntary, what does the PUC do?
They only have one option.
They pass the cost onto the regular ratepayers.
Precisely. They socialize the cost. They take that billion-dollar infrastructure upgrade, divide it by every homeowner, renter, and small business in the state, and your monthly electric bill goes up by $20.
Wow.
This is a classic example of regulatory capture and political theater. The administration gets to hold a press conference and claim they protected consumers, which provides great optics. The tech companies get to stand next to the administration looking like responsible, civic-minded corporate citizens.
Which boosts their public relations.
Exactly. But when the actual legal bills come due in a windowless state commission hearing room 2 years from now, the average citizen is left holding the bag.
Man, it's like your roommate moving a massive, incredibly loud, power-hungry crypto mining rig into your tiny shared apartment. And when you freak out about the upcoming electricity bill, they tell you, relax. I mean, a voluntary pledge to the landlord to chip in for the electric bill.
That's exactly it.
But when you ask them to sign a legally binding updated lease that guarantees they'll pay the overages, they refuse. Who is really taking on the financial risk in that apartment? You are. Because your name is the one on the actual binding contract with the power company.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the asymmetry of the risk here. The profits of the AI revolution are hyper-privatized. I mean, the massive financial gains go to the shareholders of the tech companies, but the foundational risk, the structural cost of generating the power, is socialized across the entire population through these non-binding agreements.
And the risk isn't just financial. This is where the document gets really interesting and honestly, pretty concerning.
Yeah, let's get into that.
The fact sheet spends a significant amount of time detailing the administration's actions to drastically expand the energy supply to meet this new AI demand. It specifically praises the rollback of what it calls the Green New Scam, and it boasts about taking executive action to save 74 coal power plants from environmental restrictions that would have forced them to shut down.
And if we pull on that thread, we move from the economic mechanisms of the document right into the physical, biological mechanisms of human health. We have to look at why these tech companies desperately want aging coal plants kept online.
Right, because AI data centers cannot run on intermittent power, can they?
No, they can't. If the wind stops blowing or a cloud covers a solar farm, you cannot just turn off a billion-dollar AI training model for an hour. They require what is called baseload power, consistent, unyielding 24-hour electricity.
And coal plants, despite being older technology, provide exactly that kind of consistent baseload. You just keep shoveling the coal into the furnace.
Correct. But here is the critical distinction between intent and effect. The stated intent of this entire document is to protect the American public. But what is the actual effect of bypassing environmental regulations to keep 74 aging coal power plants online?
Who actually wins there?
The immediate beneficiaries are the massive tech monopolies who get their fast-tracked baseload power, and the fossil fuel corporations operating those aging plants, who suddenly get a new lease on life without having to pay for expensive emissions scrubbers.
But the people living in the shadow of those 74 coal plants, I mean, they are the ones paying the hidden tax.
They are paying with their physical health. When a government bypasses environmental regulations to keep a heavily polluting plant online, a plant that was slated for closure specifically because its emissions were deemed too toxic for the surrounding community, that is a stark policy choice.
It really is.
You are prioritizing the unchecked development of artificial intelligence over the biological health of the citizens living in that zip code. We are talking about the mechanics of human physiology here. Increased particulate matter and sulfur dioxide emissions lead directly, statistically, to increased rates of pediatric asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and cardiovascular failure in those specific localized communities.
So we have a document that promises to protect your wallet from a rate hike. A promise that, as we've established, is legally toothless and entirely voluntary. But in the exact same breath, it takes concrete, immediate, legally binding deregulatory action that will objectively degrade the air quality and the healthcare outcomes of everyday Americans.
Yep, it's the ultimate sleight of hand.
Look at this shiny voluntary pledge over here, but don't look over there while we extend the life of a toxic smokestack in your neighborhood to feed a tech monopoly's data center.
And notice the difference in how the government wields its power here. When the policy benefits the corporation rolling back the environmental regulation to keep the coal plant open, the execution is swift, aggressive, and legally concrete.
The plant stays open immediately.
Exactly. But when the policy is supposedly designed to protect the citizen, keeping the utility bill low, the government suddenly relies on voluntary negotiations. The architecture of the policy fundamentally favors the entity with the most capital.
Speaking of capital, if these tech giants are managing to socialize the cost of their massive energy grid upgrades, and they're getting the government to slash regulations to keep their power cheap, they must have an unbelievable amount of cash freed up.
Oh, they do.
Which leads us perfectly into the next document on the desk. Because the sheer amount of money these corporations are throwing around is almost impossible to comprehend.
The March 8th fact sheet regarding domestic investments.
Exactly. The headline of this document claims that the administration's America First policies have secured literally trillions of dollars in new private sector investments. It is a very long, very detailed list. Let me just read a few of these numbers.
Please do. They're wild.
Apple is listed as announcing a $600 billion investment. Meta, another $600 billion. A joint venture called Project Stargate, led by OpenAI and Oracle, announces a $500 billion investment. Amazon is in here for $340 billion. The pitch is that this is an unprecedented historic wave of manufacturing and wealth flowing directly into the United States economy.
We need to pause and establish the sheer, terrifying scale of the numbers written on this piece of paper, because the human brain is not biologically wired to comprehend a billion, let alone a trillion.
Right, it's just a word with a lot of zeros after it.
Exactly, it becomes abstract. So let's ground it. The gross domestic product, the total value of all goods and services produced in an entire year for a developed, industrialized nation like Sweden, is roughly around $600 billion.
Wait, really?
Yes. So this official White House document is claiming that a single tech company, Apple, is injecting the equivalent of the entire Swedish economy into United States domestic manufacturing.
When you put it like that, it sounds completely absurd.
It sounds absurd because in the context of immediate, tangible domestic investment, it is. And this brings us to one of the most common and most deceptive mechanisms of political communication. Administrations of all political stripes engage in this practice.
Which is what, exactly?
They take vague, forward-looking corporate press releases and launder them into official government policy victories. We have to analyze the underlying financial mechanics here. Are these companies legally depositing 600 billion liquid dollars into a checking account to build American factories tomorrow morning?
I'm going to guess the answer is no. But I want you to explain exactly why. Because if I turn on the news, I see ribbons being cut in new factories. I see real concrete being poured. So some of this money has to be real, right?
Some of it is absolutely real. If Amazon builds a $200 million fulfillment center in Ohio, that is real concrete, real jobs, and a real localized economic impact. But 200 million is a rounding error compared to the 340 billion listed in the document.
So where's the rest of it?
The discrepancy lies in the difference between committed capital expenditure, what businesses call CapEx, and global, multi-decade strategic public relations.
Okay, break that down for me. How do they actually get to 600 billion?
Let's use Apple as the hypothetical model based on the figures in the text. Apple might issue a press release to its shareholders saying, over the next 20 years, we project that our global investments in research, development, supply chain optimization, and stock buybacks will total $600 billion.
Ah, I see.
That number includes everything from paying software engineers in California to sourcing minerals in Africa to assembling phones in Asia, projected out over 2 decades. What the political fact sheet does is strip away the 20 years part, strip away the global part, and repackage that massive aggregate number as a present-day victory for domestic policy.
So it's essentially a corporate megaphone. Apple wants to look like an unstoppable juggernaut to boost their stock price on a quarterly earnings call.
Right.
And the administration wants to look like they possess a magic wand that creates economic miracles. So the administration takes Apple's inflated 20-year global projection, slaps the presidential seal on it, and publishes it in a fact sheet.
That is precisely the mechanism, and it highlights a deeply symbiotic relationship between massive corporate monopolies and the executive branch. We have to ask, who actually benefits from this theatrical exchange of massive numbers?
Well, the administration gets to run a campaign ad saying they brought trillions to the economy, but what does the corporation get out of it? Why play along with the political theater?
Oh, the corporation gets invaluable political favor and regulatory leniency.
Really, like a trade.
Absolutely. When a tech giant provides the administration with a spectacular headline-grabbing number to boast about, they are buying goodwill. In exchange for that PR victory, these massive corporations often receive highly favorable tax treatments, the exact kind of environmental deregulation we just discussed regarding the coal plants, and most importantly, a very hands-off approach from federal antitrust regulators.
Wow. So it's an unwritten trade.
Exactly. We will make your economic policy look historically successful on paper, and in return, you will let us consolidate our monopoly power without interference.
So if we bring this back to the listener, you are driving to work or you are making dinner and you hear the news anchor say, today, the administration announced a historic $600 billion investment from big tech. Does the average American worker actually see a dime of that in their paycheck?
No.
Does it lower the price of groceries or make housing more affordable?
For the vast majority of citizens, the answer is no. Because the money, in the way it is presented, does not actually exist in the immediate domestic economy. It is a projection. It is a corporate financial forecast beautifully dressed up as an immediate political triumph.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
Right, because while there are localized benefits from smaller actual facility constructions, these trillion-dollar aggregate figures are high-level corporate signaling happening in a financial stratosphere that the regular working class never interacts with.
It is genuinely incredible when you step back and look at the picture these first 2 documents paint. We have tech giants throwing around imaginary trillions for PR, building massive physical servers that require us to keep heavily polluting 1970s coal plants burning in our backyards while dodging the bill for the electrical grid.
It's quite a system.
But here's where the story gets deeply personal and honestly very dark. Because while these tech corporations are extracting immense wealth and political favor, everyday Americans are actively losing their actual, hard-earned life savings inside the very digital ecosystem that these tech companies built and supposedly secure.
Which is a vital pivot in our analysis. We're moving from the abstract realm of corporate wealth and macroeconomic projections right into the visceral reality of individual vulnerability and exploitation.
Let's look at the third set of documents. I have an executive order and an accompanying fact sheet from March 6th. The focus is combating cybercrime, fraud, and predatory schemes. And the statistics they cite right in the preamble are devastating. The text states that American consumers lost more than $12.5 billion to cyber fraud in 2024 alone.
And the text explicitly acknowledges that this is not a victimless crime impacting faceless institutions. The most vulnerable demographics, the elderly, children, and low-income families, are disproportionately targeted by these schemes.
Right. The document details the rise of transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs. It talks about massive overseas scam centers, the deployment of ransomware crippling hospitals, and the orchestration of complex financial fraud and sextortion schemes targeting teenagers.
It's a massive threat vector.
So the administration's stated intent here is twofold. They are creating a new operational cell to dismantle these cartels, and they are proposing something called a victims restoration program.
Before we dissect the structural problems with that restoration program, we must adhere to our methodology and acknowledge the concrete, legally sound elements found within this text, because this document is not entirely political theater.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, the fact sheet prominently highlights a piece of legislation called the Take It Down Act, noting that it was heavily championed by the First Lady.
Yes, and I want to spend a minute on this because it feels different from the other policies we've looked at.
It is fundamentally different. Unlike the voluntary corporate energy pledges or the vague multi-decade corporate investment claims, the Take It Down Act is a concrete bipartisan law. It addresses a specific, devastating mechanism of cyber exploitation.
Specifically regarding kids, right?
Exactly. The proliferation of deepfakes, non-consensual intimate imagery, and online extortion targeting youth.
The documents refer to this specific predatory behavior as sextortion.
Correct. And the mechanics of this law are vital to understand. It doesn't just ask tech platforms to voluntarily negotiate better behavior. It provides tangible, legally binding mechanisms to force the removal of exploitative content from the internet.
So it actually has teeth.
Real teeth. It establishes liability. It creates a standardized process where victims or their parents can issue takedown notices that platforms are legally compelled to honor.
So if a teenager is being targeted by a predator using a deepfake image to extort them, this law actually provides a real-world weapon to stop the abuse.
Exactly. This is a clear, undeniable example of a policy that genuinely helps everyday Americans. It directly protects the mental health, the privacy, and the inherent human dignity of young people.
That's amazing.
When we analyze this stack of documents looking for actions that have a real beneficial effect on human life, actions that bridge the gap between intent and reality, the Take It Down Act stands out as a profound success. It proves that the legislative machinery can protect the vulnerable when it is deployed with precision.
That is a massive relief to read. It's a real tool helping real people. But then I keep reading down the page, and I get to the section detailing the Victims Restoration Program, and my skeptical radar immediately starts pinging again.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
The pitch here is incredibly bold. The document suggests that the government is going to hunt down these foreign transnational cyber cartels, seize their stolen billions, and give that money directly back to the scammed victims.
It is an incredibly seductive promise.
Seductive is the perfect word. I mean, if my grandmother gets tricked by a phishing email and wires her $50,000 retirement savings to a scam center overseas, this document makes it sound like the Department of Justice is going to track down the hackers, seize their bank accounts, and cut my grandmother a check to make her whole again.
Like a digital Robin Hood.
It sounds exactly like a digital Robin Hood operation.
And this is precisely where we must apply intense scrutiny to the phrasing, because this section is a masterclass in deceptive textual drafting. Let's look at the exact legal mandate within Section 3 of the Executive Order.
Let's hear it.
It directs the Attorney General to submit a recommendation for a program to provide restoration to victims, and I quote the text exactly, to the greatest extent authorized by law.
Ah, there it is. The fine print. To the greatest extent authorized by law. What is that phrase actually doing in this sentence?
It is an admission of legal impotence. Yes. That phrase does a massive amount of heavy lifting, quietly acknowledging that the executive branch likely possesses almost zero authority to actually execute the program they are publicly announcing. The legal, logistical, and constitutional hurdles of international civil asset forfeiture and targeted domestic redistribution are practically insurmountable.
I want to push back on this, though, because I see news stories all the time about the FBI seizing drug money or taking down a dark web server and seizing millions in Bitcoin. The government clearly has the ability to seize criminal assets.
Sure they do.
So why can't they just take that seized Bitcoin and give it back to the victims? What is the actual hurdle?
Let's break down the mechanics of how this money actually moves, and you will see why the Robin Hood scenario falls apart. Step 1, your hypothetical grandmother wires her $50,000 to a scammer.
Okay.
Step 2, the scammer immediately moves that money into an overseas decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. Step 3, the crypto is tumbled or mixed through thousands of microtransactions to obscure its origin.
So it's completely untraceable.
Essentially, yes. Step 4, it lands in a cold wallet server located in a jurisdiction that is actively hostile to the United States, say Russia or North Korea.
So the FBI can't just serve a warrant to a server in St. Petersburg. The Russian government is going to laugh at them. Jurisdiction is zero.
Exactly. But let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that the criminal organization makes a mistake. Let's say they route the funds through a server in a cooperative allied nation, like the Netherlands.
Okay, that sounds promising.
The FBI coordinates with Dutch authorities, they raid the server farm, and they successfully seize $500 million in stolen cryptocurrency. A massive victory.
Okay, great. The U.S. government now has the money. Why can't they write the check to my grandmother?
Because of the Constitution of the United States.
Seriously?
Specifically, the interplay between Article 1 and Article 2. The executive branch, the President, and the Department of Justice has the authority to enforce the law and seize criminal assets. However, they do not have the power of the purse. The Constitution dictates that only Congress can appropriate funds.
Wait, really?
Yes. When the DOJ seizes asset forfeiture funds, that money generally goes into a specific federal fund or directly into the general treasury. The president cannot simply bypass Congress, set up a bespoke victims restoration entitlement program by executive order, and start mailing checks to individuals in Ohio based on seized international crypto.
So even if they catch the bad guys, and even if they get the exact stolen money back, the executive branch legally cannot redistribute it to the victims without a specific, detailed act of Congress.
Correct. Creating a massive federal redistribution program requires statutory legislation, funding mechanisms, and congressional oversight. By framing this in an executive order with the caveat to the greatest extent authorized by law, the administration is engaging in profound political theater.
It's phantom promise.
It serves as a psychological comfort. It tells the aggrieved, traumatized citizen, we see your pain, we are fighting for you, and we are going to get your money back.
But functionally.
Functionally, setting up an executive task force to write a recommendation about a program that faces insurmountable constitutional hurdles is very different from actually returning stolen life savings. It is a promise of restoration that the law, as currently written, simply cannot fulfill.
Man. So within a single cybercrime policy rollout, we have a brilliantly effective law protecting kids from deepfakes, which is phenomenal, sitting directly adjacent to a completely theatrical promise to refund billions of dollars that structurally cannot be kept.
It really forces you to read every single sentence of these documents twice, looking for the catch.
Which is an excellent habit to cultivate, particularly as we transition away from domestic policy and look at how this administration attempts to shape international reality through text. Because the final stack of documents deals with foreign policy and national security, where the stakes are quite literally life and death. Let's dive into the foreign policy arena. We have a proclamation dated March 7th on countering cartel criminal activity. We have a March 9th list of nominations, specifically elevating an individual named Mark Wayne Mullen to a senior role at the Department of Homeland Security. And we have a March 9th proclamation marking U.S. hostage and wrongful detainee day.
If you read these three texts sequentially, an overwhelming thematic pattern emerges. The rhetoric is aggressively hardline. It is designed to project absolute, uncompromising strength.
It is incredibly aggressive. The cartel proclamation does not mince words. It declares that these transnational criminal organizations control massive swaths of territory, wield military-grade capabilities, and essentially function as foreign terrorist organizations operating right on the U.S. border.
The intent is clear there.
Right. The intent is that the administration wants the public to know they're taking the gloves off and treating the cartels as a military threat, not just a law enforcement problem.
And just as we analyze the phrase voluntarily negotiate regarding the energy grid, we need to analyze the specific geopolitical vocabulary chosen in this cartel document. In the text, there is a pledge regarding something called the America's Counter-Cartel Coalition.
Okay, what does it say?
The document states that this coalition demonstrates that the region is ready to, and I quote, operationalize hard power to defeat these threats to our security and civilization.
Okay, operationalize hard power. To the average person, that just sounds like tough political speak. But in the specific academic world of diplomacy and international relations, what does hard power actually mean?
It is not a metaphor. In geopolitical strategy, power is divided into two broad categories. Soft power is the use of cultural influence, economic persuasion, foreign aid, and diplomacy to achieve your goals.
And hard power.
Hard power implies physical coercion. It implies the use of armed intervention, kinetic strikes, and the deployment of military force.
Let me stop you right there. Is this official White House proclamation casually suggesting the use of the United States military against drug cartels?
Yes. That is the direct implication of the phrase, operationalize hard power. And I want to flag this immediately for the listener because the legal and constitutional implications of that phrase are staggering.
Right, because the cartels are primarily located in Mexico, and Mexico is a sovereign nation. We are not at war with Mexico.
Precisely. Using the United States military to conduct combat operations, hard power against cartels inside the borders of a sovereign partner nation without an explicit declaration of war or direct congressional approval triggers massive constitutional red flags.
Because of the War Powers Act.
Primarily revolving around the War Powers Resolution of 1973, yes.
Explain the mechanism there. Why can't the president just order the military to take out a cartel compound just over the border? I mean, he's the commander-in-chief.
The commander-in-chief directs the armed forces, but the Constitution vests the power to declare war exclusively with Congress. The War Powers Act was designed to prevent presidents from entangling the U.S. in foreign conflicts without congressional consent.
Even if it's right on the border.
Even if the president argues that cartels are a direct threat to national security, initiating kinetic military operations in a foreign country requires an authorization for use of military force, or AUMF, passed by the legislature.
Wow.
Furthermore, even if a partner nation, say, the Mexican government invited U.S. military presence to help fight the cartels, sustaining hard power operations requires vast amounts of funding, which, as we discussed with the cybercrime funds, requires congressional appropriation.
So we are faced with two possibilities here. Either the administration has a real, highly classified, actionable military plan to deploy troops into Mexico, which risks a massive international incident, the collapse of North American trade, and a profound constitutional crisis regarding war powers. Or it is highly aggressive political theater designed to sound as tough as possible for a domestic audience. It's rhetoric designed to project ultimate authority while masking the complex, messy, and often frustrating reality of international law enforcement cooperation.
Given the immense legal, diplomatic, and logistical hurdles of deploying hard power in the Western Hemisphere, the text leans heavily toward theater. It is a projection of strength that the executive branch legally cannot back up without the explicit cooperation of both the U.S. Congress and foreign governments.
It is like declaring to your entire family that you are going to legally banish your neighbor from the city because they keep playing loud music at 2 a.m.
Right.
You sound incredibly tough and authoritative at the dinner table. But when you look at the actual legal mechanisms available to you, all you can really do is file a noise complaint with the local precinct. You don't possess the authority to execute the threat you just made.
That is a very apt framing. The administration is writing a script where they possess omnipotent power to solve complex problems. And this strategy, this attempt to create an alternate, simplified reality entirely through text, is even more pronounced and frankly more concerning in the final document, the hostage proclamation from March 9th.
Yes, I want to look very closely at this one because the phrasing here genuinely stopped me in my tracks.
Let's hear it.
So, the text begins exactly how you would expect a ceremonial proclamation to begin. It commemorates the Americans who have been unjustly held abroad or taken hostage by terrorist organizations. It is a solemn, vital thing for a government to acknowledge.
Of course.
It notes that the administration has secured the release of 101 detained Americans in just 1 year, which is a significant achievement. But then, tucked right into the middle of a paragraph, there is a sentence that made me question my own reading comprehension.
I know exactly the sentence you're referring to. Let's analyze it.
The document says, and I'm quoting the text directly, "We have successfully brokered a historic peace deal between Israel and Gaza to deliver all remaining hostages to their families and loved ones."
Yeah. This specific sentence raises profound questions about the nature of truth in official government communications. Tucking a massive, historic Nobel Peace Prize-level geopolitical claim into a routine annual day of commemorative proclamation is just astonishing.
Right. If you actually brokered a definitive, historic peace deal in one of the most complex, tragic, and deeply entrenched conflicts in modern human history, you do not bury it in paragraph 2 of a ceremonial memo.
No, you don't.
You hold a global summit at Camp David. The leaders of the world are present. You have primetime addresses on every network.
Which tells us that the reality on the ground likely does not match the finality of the text. This is a quintessential example of deceptive wording designed to alter reality through assertion.
How so?
Let's look at the mechanics of Middle Eastern diplomacy. If there's a temporary cessation of hostilities to allow for a phased exchange of prisoners and hostages, that is a delicate, highly fragile, ongoing diplomatic process. It can break down at any hour.
Right, it's incredibly volatile.
By flattening all of that extraordinary nuance, fragility, and ongoing conflict into the definitive past tense statement, we successfully brokered a historic peace deal. The administration is attempting to force reality to conform to their text.
That's a bold move.
They are claiming absolute, closed-book political credit for an event that is almost certainly still dangerously fluid.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to the daily life of the listener, I think we have to talk about the psychology of why these documents are written this way. Foreign policy, cartels, the Middle East, cyber cartels, these things feel terrifying and often disconnected from our immediate daily routines.
They induce a lot of anxiety.
Exactly. The portrayal of these actions in these documents is intimately connected to our need for psychological safety. The administration wants to project total strength. They want to make you feel completely secure, to assure you that the adults are in the room and the monsters have been vanquished.
That there's a catch.
Right. But if you are listening to this, you have to ask yourself a hard question. Are you actually safer because a written proclamation claims that a historic peace deal was achieved? Or are you just being told a soothing story of absolute victory so you don't worry about the terrifying, messy details of how the world actually works?
That is the core tension of reading official government documents. They're fundamentally designed to project certainty in an inherently uncertain world. And when the text demands certainty where none exists, well, the text becomes a fiction.
Okay, let's take a collective breath. We have analyzed a massive amount of incredibly dense material today. I want to step back and synthesize exactly what we have pulled out of this stack of paper. Because when we view these executive orders, fact sheets, and proclamations as a whole, looking at a single week in March 2026, a very clear, almost mechanical pattern emerges regarding who gets protected and who gets subjected to political theater.
The underlying architecture of power becomes very visible when you strip away the partisan rhetoric and look strictly at the legal enforcement mechanisms.
Right. What we have seen, undeniably, is that when policies directly benefit massive corporate entities or the incredibly wealthy, the legal execution is remarkably swift and concrete.
It happens fast.
Rolling back environmental regulations to keep aging, polluting coal plants running to power AI data centers, that deregulation happens immediately. The financial benefits to the tech monopolies and the fossil fuel industry are legally binding and tangible. The tax leniency and antitrust blindness granted in exchange for theatrical trillion-dollar investment announcements, those benefits are structurally enforced.
Conversely, when we look at the policies within these documents that are supposedly designed to protect the everyday American citizen, the legal mechanics suddenly become incredibly murky, voluntary, or entirely unconstitutional.
Like the pledges.
Right. The promise to keep the ratepayer's utility bill from spiking is hidden behind a legally toothless voluntary pledge that will dissolve the moment a state utility commission holds a rate hearing.
And the cybercrime victims.
The promise to return scammed life savings to the elderly is trapped behind the unconstitutional pipe dream of executive civil asset redistribution that bypasses the congressional power of the purse.
And foreign policy.
The promise to aggressively deploy military hard power against cartels casually ignores the War Powers Act and international sovereignty. And the promise of a definitively historic global peace deal is quietly tucked into a ceremonial memo to project an illusion of total control.
But, and this is a vital caveat to our analysis, we did find exceptions. The machinery of government is not entirely broken. The Take I Down Act, aimed at protecting youth from digital exploitation and deep fakes, is a concrete law.
A very real one.
It has real liability structures and real enforcement mechanisms that provide genuine protection for the dignity and mental health of vulnerable people.
Which proves the ultimate point. The government is entirely capable of enacting precise, beneficial, legally sound mechanics when it chooses to navigate the actual rigorous legislative process, rather than relying on the theatrical shortcuts of executive orders and non-binding pledges.
So, as we look at this entire mountain of paper on the desk, I want to hand the floor over to you for a final thought. We've dissected the laws, the economy, and the rhetoric. What is the one underlying concept you want the listener to take away and mull over as they digest all of this information?
I want to build on something we touched on during the cybercrime discussion, and that is the concept of the shadow economy.
Okay, the shadow economy.
We have a tendency, both in media and in our daily lives, to think of the world in isolated silos. We think technology is over here, energy policy is over there, foreign policy is in another box, and criminal justice is in its own separate category.
Right, it's easier to categorize things that way.
But if you look holistically at the documents we examined today, you realize how completely, terrifyingly interconnected our modern ecosystem has become. Think about the physical, geographical reality of what we just discussed.
Now,
You have massive, sprawling data centers sitting in Virginia running complex artificial intelligence algorithms for a tech giant. To provide the massive baseload power for those servers, you have an aging fossil fuel plant burning coal around the clock, emitting particulates into the lungs of the local community.
right.
Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, foreign criminal cartels are utilizing those exact same global internet networks, powered by those exact same servers, to deploy deepfakes and hack into the retirement accounts of the very people breathing that polluted air.
Oh, wow. That's a crazy visual.
And the money they steal is laundered through digital currencies built by the same tech sector, demanding the energy deregulation.
It's all connected.
It is not a series of isolated policies. It is a single, invisible, globally integrated ecosystem. And the most profound question we have to ask ourselves after reading these official documents is this: can any single piece of paper signed by any one person sitting at a desk in Washington, D.C. truly control a network that is fundamentally borderless?
That's a huge question.
Or are these proclamations, executive orders, and fact sheets simply humanity's attempt to write a comforting, localized instruction manual for a global machine that has already grown far beyond our comprehension?
That is an incredible amount to chew on. It reminds me of the feeling you get when you finally sign that massive stack of papers to buy a house. You put your pen down, someone hands you the keys, and for a brief, fleeting moment, you feel like you are entirely in control of your reality. But you still have absolutely no idea what is waiting in the ground beneath the foundation.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. It's been a deeply illuminating journey through the fine print of our world. Stay curious, always look for the underlying mechanisms, keep reading past the headlines, and we will talk to you next time.